Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Love Well podcast. My name is Marlene,
And my name is Anna.
and we are so glad that we are back here, back with our immigration series. And we have a new guest today. But if you missed last week's episode, we talked with Angelica Garnett, and it was an incredible conversation. So please go back and listen to that story. But for today's episode, we have Joël, and Anna is going to tell us a little bit more about our guest today.
Yes, thank you for joining us, Joel. So this is another friend of ours, like we've been doing and saying with you guys beforehand. We've just been able to really be able to bring people on that have an amazing story, that have immigrated here from all over the world. And we're just honored and privileged for them to be able to come on the podcast and be able to share their story. So Joel, will you tell us a little bit about you and where you're from originally, and just give our listeners a little bit of who you are?
My name is Joël Kwaku. Most people around here call me Joel. I go by both names. It's okay. I am originally from the Ivory Coast, which is in West Africa, a small country next to Ghana. I think most people here have heard of Ghana.
Yeah.
I moved here around 2004, so it's been almost 20 years now. So my English is much, much better than it used to be when I moved here. Um, I A little bit of my interests. I like cooking. I cook quite a bit. I play soccer, and I tend to travel quite a bit as well. So those are some of the things that I do. And fun fact, I was on Good Morning America when I was in high school for robotics. So that's something that we might get into. That's something.
Wow. That's amazing. Also, real quick,
Got that in there.
who's your favorite soccer team?
Ooh, it keeps changing, but right now I would say
Okay.
Manchester City. They're doing quite well.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good. That's good. Are you Ronaldo over Messi?
No,
Or
I didn't even
Messi?
look at both of them. No, they're both good players,
Oh,
but
okay. No, yeah. I feel that. Who's your favorite
yeah.
player? Sorry, I don't want to make it about, but I just, I have to. I have
So, favorite player all time, uh, DJ Drogba from Ivory Coast. I'm being biased,
Okay.
but I feel like it was
Oh,
amazing
awesome.
on the field and off the field too. Some of the things that he did for the Ivory Coast, um, it. He deserves a lot of respect for what he did.
Hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, thank you.
Marlon and her husband are big soccer fans as
We
well.
are, we are.
So,
That's why I was asking,
Okay.
love
yeah.
soccer.
What's your favorite team?
Big Messi fan too, so just putting it out there. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, will you tell us a little bit about how it was like growing up in the Ivory Coast of Africa and like what it was like? You said you moved here in 2004, so how old were you when you moved?
Ooh, I was 16, I think. But it was via
Okay.
Canada. So a little bit of background
Mm.
story. So I was born in the Ivory Coast, and I mostly lived with my grandparents. My mom was living in a different city, and my dad was not exactly in the picture. Um, so it was a normal life for there. I went to primary school there. Um, and after that, I was able to do my high school in Canada at some point. But nothing too crazy, nothing out of the blue, really. Um, my family is quite well known, or was quite well known, because my grandmother's grandfather founded my hometown, um, and we were quite involved in a lot of city things like parties and parades and other things like that. So uh, I feel like I had a really really nice. Mm.
That's awesome. That's
Nice.
awesome. could you walk us? So one of the things that we love to do here on our podcast, we know that not every immigration story is different. The way we come to the U.S. Looks very different. And if you could share with us what kind of that process looked like, yeah, could you share a little bit more of that process? Like, for example, I shared how I came here through the fiance visa, so that's like a very different story and a different process. Could you share a little bit of what that looked like for you?
Okay. So mine was a bit complicated. Um, the
Yeah.
the process itself, if you go on the U.S. Embassy website, the Ivory Coast, you have a slew of ways to immigrate to the U.S. Right? You can come here as a
Mhm.
student. You can come here on different types of visas. Mine,
Yeah.
I came through my uncle, who is on paper is my father. He's legally my dad. So
Mhm.
he moved to the U.S. first, and he was able to finish college here and start working. And the company he was working for which he's still working, actually, the company uh, sponsored him to obtain his visa, so his green card.
Yeah.
And him having that visa allowed him to easily apply for me, his son, to come here and live with him. The process is lengthy and it's expensive, and it
Yeah.
is it is not as easy as some people might make it seem like. So not only he
Yep.
applied it
We
once,
talked about that. We
he
actually
got,
had an episode where we talked about that.
yeah, he
Yeah.
got denied a few times actually, to bring me to
Mhm.
come live here
Mhm.
with him. So the goal was for me to finish my middle school there and then to move here and do high school uh, here, right? Better school, better opportunities,
Yeah.
and new life, really. And after he got denied a few times, he got the genius idea of, well, trying Canada instead. Uh, and
Mhm.
and the idea was that Canada was accepting a lot of people, and Canada
Mhm.
could be maybe a segue into the US to some extent, or we could stay in Canada. So he applied for Canada, and we got it, right. It was me and his daughter, and his wife. So we did get the Canada visa and we were able to move there. We lived in Ontario for a while waiting for um, him to apply again for the try again. So while we were in Canada, I was able to uh, go to high school there, learn English, make some friends,
Mhm.
basically start getting into the Western life. Um, and then while we were there, he was able to obtain the visa, so we went through, and we moved from Canada to Illinois, actually, where I was living.
Okay.
And that is sort of a short story. It's a bit longer than that, but in a few words, that's basically what happened.
No, that's great. It usually, yes, the immigration process, it's a lot longer than people
Mhm.
usually think. It's a lot more expensive, and the waiting times are very extended usually. So thank you for sharing because yes, there's always we tell people on here on the episodes every story is different and it's going to look different in every process, the waiting times. Even we talked about it with when we had Gabby on here. She grew up in London, and immigrating from London to the US, it's a different wait time than when you immigrate from Latin America or Africa. So yeah, and the fact that can I ask real quick, just because I'm curious, how when you got denied, what was the waiting time that you had to how long did you have to wait to be able to apply again?
Apply again. I'm not sure that I know the process. I was quite young, so
Mm.
he wasn't exactly sharing
Okay,
the detail with us. Um,
that makes
but
sense. Makes sense.
I think originally the plan was for me to come much earlier. Like, it took all the way to
Mm.
high school, right, to move here. So by the time we moved here with him, I think I was about 16. So, and I think it
Wow.
started
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
when I was
Quite
around
young.
8 or 9. So that's a few
Yeah.
years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah, it was
honestly kind of
late.
reminds me of Lihia's story too, because we had a guest on here that also she went to Canada and then I think she went to California after
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, you had mentioned that your family was quite well known back home. And if this is too personal, it's okay. You don't have to share. But what was the reason for you to come to Canada or try to immigrate to the States?
In the
Mhm.
States. I believe it's the next step up. It's the next thing. It's not that we had a bad life.
Okay.
We actually did have quite a good life. But uh, some parents want better things or bigger things for their children. Right? In
Mm,
Africa, it's limited to sustain
Mm.
to some extent
mm,
in
Yeah.
infrastructure, in schooling, so education, opportunities, and such. So when they have a bigger vision for the child and for themselves, they tend to move away to the next thing. And since my uncle was already here, it made sense. It was kind of like
right.
a direct line, somewhere to be, someone to be with,
Yeah.
and such. So it made sense to
Yeah.
come.
What was the biggest like culture shock whenever because you said you
Mm.
went from Canada to Illinois, right?
Yeah.
So what was the biggest culture shock in your experience? I know you were younger, but that you can remember
Yeah.
being like, wow, this is very different.
Yeah, well, of course, there's the cold, right? So I go straight from
Mm.
a
Yeah.
88-degree all year long type climate to negative whatever Toronto had to give me that day.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
So
I can imagine.
that
Yeah.
was like a nice baptism, like welcome to the West.
Yes,
So that
it's
was interesting.
cold up here.
It was cold. I wasn't sure why people picked this place to live. I feel like that was one of the questions in my head. Uh,
Yeah.
I
even,
feel that
but
wholeheartedly.
That's
I
fair. That's fair.
feel
yeah.
that.
So, but for culture, I think the amount of cars on the road, I think for me was
Mm.
because
Mm.
we did have cars in my hometown. We did have, cars and traffic jams in the big city in Abidjan. But it was just mind blowing, like how many people were out there in cars and like nobody's walking, sort of speaking. The cold does make sense. Why would you be walking this cold? But still,
Yeah.
I felt like it was a little shock.
Mm.
Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah, it's not very walkable. If you don't have a car, that's
Mhm.
one of the things that I realized when I moved to, like, if you don't have a car, it's really hard. I know there's public transport, but even that is just, it's just a different experience. It's not as, normalized, or
It's
accessible.
always interesting. That's why I was asking that question because it's always interesting, like everyone's different take on things. Like I remember Marlon saying when she first moved to the States, like she was like, I didn't know that I didn't know how to pump gas because they
Yeah.
pump gas
Yeah,
back where she's from. So
Yep.
it's just like the little things that are always,
Yeah.
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 Even in the
Little
Ivory
things that
Coast,
become
yeah.
big
When we
things.
go
Yeah.
back, we still have that. Yeah, we still have people there
And
pumping.
yeah,
Yeah.
they pump it for you. Yeah. So
Hmm.
like little things like that is just funny and interesting to see how people's experiences are different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And and
So you
and
mentioned, oh, okay.
oh, by the way, it's still very walkable there right now, even many years later. When I go back, I still, use taxis and such, but a lot of time I walk places, and it's not small
Mm,
distances. I go through neighborhoods and stuff like that, and
Mm.
it's
yeah.
just different lifestyle.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's cultural. Yeah. It becomes like what is the norm, somewhere else is going to look different in a different country. So thank you for sharing that because we always learning about what life looks like outside of the US. And I love, love, love learning of the different ways of life from, of other people that live in different parts of the world. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
New knowledge acquired for sure. New knowledge acquired. Yeah. What are some of the things that you can say that you could share? What did it look like to adjust to living in a new country? You immigrate. How did you navigate through that? Could you share some of that?
Oh yeah. Um, so for me, I think the first thing, or one of the first things, was the language barrier. I did learn English a
Mm,
little bit when I was there, but it was very basic, like different words and how to structure a
yeah.
sentence in English, but it wasn't very advanced. In fact, I wasn't understanding what I was watching on TV a lot of time.
Mm,
So that language barrier was one of the things that kind of threw me off. But I was in English as second language, ESL, for a little bit.
mhm,
Um, so that did help me quite a bit. And another really cool thing that was amazing, and I feel like that was a a God blessing thing, was the school
mhm,
that I ended up going to when I moved to Canada had a French immersion program, and they put me in the program right away. Although a lot of the people that were in it had to do it from when they were much younger, right? So I was taking half of my classes in French and English. So
mm.
that helped me. It was a rampage. This is like everything is in English right away. So I was able to make friends with not only the students but the teachers too, because they're French as well. I speak, I still speak to one of my teachers actually. He's retired. He's chat once in a
Wow.
while.
Wow.
Yeah, my old business teacher. So, very amazing person. So that French immersion program helped me ramp to getting my English there. And then, interestingly enough, the second year after I started going to that school, they stopped the ESL program. So my English courses were not that basic anymore. They're regular English courses. So it was kind of like, well, now you're here. You've had about 6, 8 months to get adjusted to this to this language. Um, so I walked into my math class. It was full English. My English class was regular English for Canadians, and I was fighting. I was fighting. I ended up uh, doing really well. In fact, um, I saw something that they post on the wall, and apparently it was the list of the best students. And I saw a friend's name. Her name was Rebecca. I still remember this very vividly, actually. I saw Rebecca's name at the top, and I was like, Rebecca's the best student in this whole school. I want to be number one. So I started, you know, um, studying a whole lot more and fighting, although my English wasn't well. So I went from not being on that list at all to being number 13 in the entire class before I left Canada. I didn't make it to beating Rebecca, but I was on my way. So yeah,
The competitive edge.
I was really competitive. I still am. Yeah, I make a lot of things. I gamify a lot of things in my life.
Mm, yeah.
Well, yeah, didn't you also kind of like fast forwarding, didn't you also play soccer in college?
I did, and that I have a wonderful story to tell you about that and how God was able to.
Are
Um,
you would
I
You
you
can
can
want to
get
tell
it.
share your story?
Sure, sure,
me.
sure.
Now I'm curious. I'm curious.
We're
I need to
here, we're
know.
listening.
This is how this guy went from having nothing to pay for college to being okay, to make it okay. So
Mm,
after high school, I actually did really well in high school, but I did poorly on the ACT, which is weird. How can you have a really high GPA and do poorly on the ACT?
mhm,
But I didn't do well, but I did go to a private college, university right after uh, high school, and I was studying electrical engineering, and that was one of the
mhm.
hardest schools in Illinois, and I ended up failing. In fact, I got kicked out of that school. Uh, my grades were really bad, and I was put on
Mhm.
academic probation, and I failed. And yeah, so no college after what 2.5 years of trying to look into engineering. So around that time, I started going to a community college because I didn't want to just stop. So I was taking
Hmm.
courses at the
Yep.
community college, and my relationship with God around then had become a bit stronger. I'd found an English church that I was part of. The pastor was very interesting, and one of those pastors that tell you things the way they are. So something interesting happened. Around that time, the school contacted me and told me about this internship uh, that Caterpillar was offering. Um, and I didn't have a grades for it. In fact, the school I had just gotten kicked out of, my GPA, I believe, was a 1.8 over 4. And Caterpillar was probably taking like 3.5 GPA for their internships. Um, but I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna apply anyway. I prayed about it and um, I applied and I didn't get it, right? And it's okay. And then a few days later, they call me and they say, "Hey, you didn't get into this program, but we still have a spot if you still want it." And I was like, "Wait, what?" So I took it. So I started
Yeah.
working for Caterpillar with less than desirable GPA. Over there, I was working for the global purchasing department and learning a whole lot. Made some friends there and stuff like that. So it was going quite well. So for that 6 month, I stayed with them, and then about a month or two before the internship was over, the school contacted me again and was like, "Hey, the Department of Transportation is looking for newcomers. So would you like to work for them?" Like, sure. So what I'm trying to say is it's not stuff I'm looking for. It's stuff that is coming to me. And honestly, this gotta be God. Because not only was good opportunities, but it was opportunities that I needed. I was pretty much alone in life. I didn't have financial support from family. If anything, that was hurting, actually. I'll explain later why. Um, and I applied for it. I wasn't sure I was gonna get it, but I applied for it and I actually kind of forgot about it. About a week before my internship ended at Caterpillar, they called me and they said I got the job. So it's like going from one thing to another thing. So I end up getting a job with the Department of Transportation. I get all type of insurance and all type of perks that come with working for the government. Um, so the the boss that put me was off to that Muslim. So I started working for him um, maybe some months. And Mike, his name is Mike. Mike is like, "Well, you can do a whole lot more. You're a very smart guy. I think you should get your degree." I'm like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah. You should see HR and see if they'll help you pay for it or if there's anything they can do." So I talked to HR and they're like, they won't pay for it, but they can give me leave if I want to. There's an employee leave uh, if I'm interested. So I'm like, bet. So I printed out the employee handbook or whatever it's called, and then I read things and figure out all the legal points that I have that I could use in order for me to go to school and still keep that job. So I wrote a letter to HR and I said, "Hey, I want to go back to school. I just want to leave for a while. And my boss is okay with it, and I'll come back when I'm done." Showed it to my boss. He's like, "Good." Sent it to them, and I got approved. So not only I got approved for going back to school, but I get to keep my job. So that was amazing. And one last thing was happened. A friend that I used to hang out with moved to France when I was in Canada. And had just finished with high school and he wanted to move to America. I was like, hey, sure, I'll help you out. Do whatever you need. Let me know what I need to do. So you give me address and documentation for me to America. Yeah. Started paying for community college, the community college. He got a full so he did that. And he didn't like the school and he wanted to go to a different school. And interestingly enough, he found a school that was about an hour away that was restarting the certificate. When program, new coach, and everything. And he applied for the first coach, and the coach gave him a full ride to go play there. So when I told him that I wanted to go back to school and it was still working, all that, he's like, hey, I can talk to the coach and see if the coach can hook you up with something. But so he did his thing, and they got back to me, and the coach was like, "Hey, I have a lot of players coming in. I don't know your talents, but if you want, let's do a scrimmage game, and let's see how you play. And if you're good, you can team." So cool. So we organized the game, and I showed up that day, played with my cousin, my friend Kevin, and I ended up scoring two goals in that game. So Bush saw that, got excited, hit me up. He's like, hey, I'll pay you for half of your school and you can pay for it. So mind you, I didn't really have money for school. Um, so I'm excited. I tell my boss about it. I'm like, hey, I found a school, this, HI school. So told them exactly when I'm leaving and all that. And again, I didn't have money for school. I knew that the school was gonna pay, the coach was gonna pay for half of my school, and I needed to figure out the other half. Um, because I had an American visa, green card, I was able to apply for FAFSA, but um, but I was not able to get much from it because I was using my uncle documentation, and my uncle was making quite a bit of money. So they're like, "Hey, your parents make much money, and yeah, you're not getting uh, much from us, or you're not getting from us." So not only I wasn't getting money from him, but I was getting hurt by that because he was making money. So I was kind of like in a bad situation there. So about a week before school starts, I was practicing or playing soccer with some friends, and I sprained my ankle. And I called the coach. I'm like, "Hey, coach, something happened. I'm not sure I can play. Uh, yeah, I'm kind of like out of the game for now." He's like, "It's okay. It doesn't matter. Just come and watch practice. I'll still pay for half of your schooling. Just show up and we'll see what we can do from there." So, my friend and I went there anyway. I was actually sleeping on the floor in his bedroom. I didn't have a room. I didn't have money to pay for it. Um, but I knew I wanted to go back to school. So the season starts. Actually, it was preseason, and I couldn't run. I couldn't play. I would go there and I watch a game. I would go and watch and all that. Although I was hurting, I felt the urge to play anyway. So I decided to play
Yeah.
with whatever was going on with my
Hey.
leg. Uh, so I threw myself in the game and I started practicing anyway, although I was not supposed to. And I was doing quite well. And the coach called me aside and he's like, I see your effort there. You know what? Instead of paying for half of the school, we're gonna pay for the full thing. So I went from having for not knowing how to play, how to pay for school,
Yeah.
to having the
Yeah.
full thing paid for. Also, I
Wow.
go
Look
and
at
sit
that.
down with I know. And I go and sit down with the financial office, and they're like, "Well, we'll be able to give you a little bit. It's not much, but they gave me, I think, about $3,000 in grants." And interesting enough, that would take care of apartment, like and gas. Yeah, I think for the whole semester or the whole year, something like that. So I went
That's
from not
huge.
knowing how to pay for the school to having the whole thing taken care of. So I didn't have to work. I could have just focused on school
Yeah.
and done well. So here is where it gets even more interesting, and I knew I knew that God was in there because I had the
Mm.
time to actually study and play soccer. I was doing super well. So my GPA went from what 1.8 to 3.5, I think. Um,
Nice.
and and we're beating records that the old soccer team ever had. We're beating teams that they had never beaten, and we're doing super well.
Yeah.
And I made myself available to play music at
Mhm.
church. I would
Mhm.
drive an hour every single weekend to go play. I didn't have a whole lot of money, but I made sure I had gas in the car, and I would go every single weekend. I didn't even care if I had a game or not. Um, my relationship with God got very
Mhm.
strong, and I was able
Mhm.
to see His work in my life, in my day-to-day uh, life.
Yeah.
One more thing that was able to, one more thing that helped me understand how God works was the student government elections. I had only been to that school for about a year. I knew that I wanted to be president of the college, student president. Uh, it was kind of like a desire for me. Very competitive guy, all that, all that. I I got there. I didn't really have friends besides the soccer team, and the elections were coming. I've only been there for a month. So I'm like, hey, I'm gonna try. And my friend was like, hey, that's funny. You probably won't win and all that. I'm like, I got the soccer team. That's what, like 22 votes? Only like a whole lot more to go,
Me
right?
too.
Yeah, yeah. So I prayed to God about it. I'm confident.
Mhm.
And I meet this one girl. She's like, hey, I want to be president too. She'd been there for a while. She's in the nursing program. The nursing program was huge.
Mhm.
And she's like, she wants to run for president. I'm like, I want to run for president. She's like, okay, you know what? How about I run for president and you run for vice president? We run together. I'm like, cool. So we run on the same ballot, right? And we lose. We lost against the theater kids who were popular, they knew a lot of people and all that. And that's logic.
Mm.
It's logical, it's fine.
Yeah.
So we both
Yeah.
lost. She was running for president, I was running for vice president.
Yeah.
I'd only been to that
Yeah.
school for a month. I have no friends almost. They call me.
Mm.
They're like, hey, do you still want to be vice president of the student body? I'm like, oh yeah. They're like, well, if you want it, you can have it. I'm like, well, I didn't win. They're like, yeah, the girl that won is also president of a theater group, and you cannot be president of a group and be president of a student
Okay.
government. And
Mm.
she had a choice, and she decided to stay president um, of the theater group. And I'm like, what? So I went from losing to becoming vice president of a student body. So
Yeah. Wow.
this is exciting, but I'm not president yet. About 2 months into it, we go to a conference, student government, all over Illinois. We go to a conference. The conference goes well, and then we were just debriefing, hanging out with the parents, the president, and some other people. And then the president comes to us and he's like, "Hey, I decided to go to the military, and I'm actually leaving next week." Um,
Mm.
so basically, I became president. And that's from losing and being at that school for only a few
Yeah.
months.
That's
I'm
from the
like,
bottom that we hear, pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm like, if this is not
Well, the
God,
providence of
right?
God as well, the provision.
Oh
I
yeah.
and if it's not God, and just different things that happen while I was there, it has to be divine.
Mhm.
Interesting enough,
Mm,
remember, I only had limited amount of money, limited amount
yeah,
of resources in general. That
yeah,
school had a room that had food and toiletries and other things that you can go
yeah,
to anytime that door is open and you can just grab anything. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like
yeah.
I was struggling,
What?
but at the same
Mm,
time, it's like all my needs were met. And I
yeah.
still had gas to drive an hour every weekend to church.
Mm,
It was just amazing. So, around that time, one more thing that happened that this is also when I think I felt the Holy Spirit. Um,
mhm,
I was driving from my apartment to to a school, and during the soccer season, I had injured my leg, and I had um this hospital take care of me. And they asked me to do a an ad for them, like a radio ad for them. So I went and I did the ad and I forgot about it. And usually when I drive from my apartment to the school, I listen to a podcast or music from the Ivory Coast and stuff like that.
mhm,
On that specific day, I had a sudden urge to turn on the radio, like actually regularly. And so I did. And I turned it on and it was my voice playing at that very time. The ad that I had worked on. And I'm like, oh, so this is how the Holy Spirit works. Okay, good, good. We're good here.
That's
Okay,
wild.
yeah,
okay. So I played it. I heard myself. It was it was so emotional. I think I called somebody to tell me about it. But I knew that I was okay around there.
mm,
I knew that like as my faith was growing and as God um was showing me signs in favor, I knew that. And God didn't have to do that really, but I was in
mhm,
distress.
yeah,
But around that time also, God was all I had really. And there's a reason why I didn't have family support, right? I didn't get into
mhm,
that. Part of the family is also into some practices that are not exactly Christian.
mhm,
So me uh, staying away from all of that, or trying to stay away from all of that, contributed to not having this ability to rely on family for my college life or for that part of my life. And
mhm.
I felt like God was like, "You be okay, you're okay, I got you," type thing.
Wow.
Wow. What a story.
That's the story
Yeah.
of me playing soccer in college.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it
Yeah,
Seriously.
yeah, definitely sounds like there was lots of hardships, but in the midst of
it was.
all of those things, God's provision was there. And I can
Well, and like
imagine
you
when you
said,
say you were the only Christian too, in your family, so that can feel lonely as well. But nevertheless, the Lord still, brought people into your life from what you shared, and He placed everyone, and every piece is not a surprise to Him, and every person, was divine, as yeah, divine encounters for sure.
well, and like you said too, you made yourself available, and I think that's the key to why you were able to like go from like losing the student government like ballot to like being
Yeah.
the president of student government because you were still willing to, step into stuff that you didn't know necessarily or you weren't fully prepared or equipped for, but the Lord was like, "Look, I'll open that door for you if you trust me, if you give me your faith and like, your trust." So, I think that's really cool. Thank you for sharing all that. That's really neat.
Yeah. Super neat. Super neat. Anna, do you want to go to the next question?
That kind of actually like answers our next question.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're from the Ivory Coast. What
Yeah.
is something that you want people to learn about your country I mean, I've never been, but I'm sure it's beautiful for the
Yep.
first part. Or just anything that you want people to know about, you know, growing up there, your favorite
Um,
soccer team.
sure.
Yeah.
So the Ivory Coast is a very interesting country. In fact, a lot of people in Europe um, go there on vacation, right? Um, prices used to be good. It's quite a bit more expensive now. Um, and
Mm.
right now, there's the African Soccer Cup of Nation going like happening there. So it's like a bunch of African countries go there. It's like the World Cup of Africa. So
Mhm.
right now it's crazy. It's a lot of dancing, a lot of different
Mhm.
parties, a lot of concerts and things like that happening at this moment. It's for like a month, right?
Oh, wow.
Interestingly, I picked to not go. So that's weird. I'm not even sure why I made that decision. But this is a good time to be in Ivory Coast. Um, for Ivory
Noted.
Coast, what I want you guys to know, people are very warm people. They're very warm, very nice, very welcoming. They joke a lot, so they're usually trying to have a good time. They're nice, they're safe. The food is amazing. The variety of food, it's
Mhm.
crazy. Um, you can Google Ivorian food and you see some colorful stuff there. So that's one of the things that I miss the most. I can literally go just because I miss the food. Um, like, and I see people too, of course. I go there. I see my uncles travel and go say hello to all the family members that I like. But um, of course, there's a beach. People tend to go to the beach. I don't go to the beach much when I'm there. I think it's
Mhm.
more sort of like a family type of event, and also the businesses I'm running there. I stay focused with that. I have teams that I'm running, so that takes a lot of my time. And sometimes I work from home. So yeah,
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. No, always we always love learning
Yeah.
from our guests and their home countries and when they tell us, the things and the cultural differences. And oh my gosh, you mentioned food. I can imagine. We'll have to look for a spot here. I don't know if there is food from the Ivory Coast here in Charlotte, Anna, but we
no,
can, look up. We can look
There
up.
has to be a couple of places, I would imagine.
that would be wonderful.
There has to be, but regardless of, thank you for sharing, your corner of the world.
Hmm.
And we always like to ask our guests, um, especially here after hearing your story. There was obviously a lot of hardship, and you felt you were kind of you had to figure out really how to navigate one the system but also the education system and in a second language. What is one thing when you think about that time that you could share with our listeners? How can we love well immigrants, and if you can think to back then to what was something that you wish maybe someone would have done for you or something that someone did for you that was impactful, that you felt loved and cared for. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll touch on 2 points. So first of all,
Mhm.
what people did for me that was impactful. I did mention a teacher that I still talk to
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
Canada, and I like that he was able to see my distress and what I needed around then,
Mhm.
and encourage me and tell me, hey, you can do it. Right? You're taking a regular English course. French is your main language, and you don't understand a lot of things, but don't give up. I'll help you.
Mhm.
So it was actually
Wow.
him and another teacher. They both
Mhm.
helped with my homework. They put in extra
Mhm.
time. They encouraged me. So it felt like I wasn't alone, and I was able to do it and be on the honor roll doing that. So I really like that. I had also some friends that um, were kind enough to not only befriend me but also to introduce me to their family. And those families would be like hey, you can come over for Easter, you can come over around Christmas time, you don't have to stay on campus, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I think that that kind of heart shows this face of America that we don't necessarily see on movies,
Mm.
or things like that. We don't necessarily hear of
Yeah.
in the outside world. And then we come in like, wow, Americans are caring like this. Um, so it's amazing. So that's some of the stuff that people do for me that way. So, um, but how can we help more help immigrants? I believe that certain processes are streamlined or are boxed together in
Mhm.
ways that only tell the story of people here,
Mm.
and that can hurt. For example, FAFSA. When I was applying for the FAFSA, they were asking for my parents' social security number. Well, my mother was still living in Ivory Coast. She didn't have a social security number. What do I put in that
Yeah.
box, right? How do you
Yeah.
go? How do you move on if that box is not
Mhm.
filled? So you're screwed. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, how do I do this? And just like, how many letters do I have to write to say my mother doesn't have a social security number? And you don't understand how my mother does not have a social security number. And it's not
Yeah.
that simple. And those people don't understand. And I'm not mad at them, but that's all they know, right? That everybody has a social security number. And you
Yeah.
can get your mother's social security number. So it's just like, how do I get around that? Same with when they ask for your dad's information. They're like, hey, Brendan's taxes on. Around then, I didn't have a good relationship with my uncle who was legally my dad.
Mhm.
So how do you go to someone that you don't live with or you don't have a good relationship with to say, hey, I want your tax documentation, right? So I'm
Mhm.
screwed there too. So I'm screwed twice, right? And I can get money. I have to
One way or the other.
like
Yeah.
it's just like, how do I navigate this? So I'm like, how do I apply to this with just my name, with just my information, because I live alone and I'm on my own. And she said, oh, you cannot apply until you're 24. So essentially, I didn't go back to school so after I turned 24.
Yeah.
So it took me about 9 years to get an engineering degree. Right? I
Yeah.
started with electrical engineering. Uh, I failed. I restarted with mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
Thank God by my side. And I
Mm.
succeeded.
Yeah.
So something that takes a lot of people about 4 years. It took me about 9 years.
Wow. Thank you
Yeah.
for
So I
yeah.
feel like, yeah, I feel like we could do better with not boxing everybody in the regular
Mm.
process. But when we are putting together those processes or making those decisions or coming up with um, things like that, we need to understand that not everybody is gonna fit in those boxes, right? Um, and unless that information is we need it, like
Mm.
to give people a little bit of grace because they might not have that. Even right now, there's wars going on. A lot of people are gonna be um,
Yeah.
orphans and stuff like that. How do you tell that, you know, 3-year-old or whatever at some point, like, hey, put in your parents' information here, and they don't know.
Yeah.
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 Basically, I just want an
No,
escape box where I can just check it and be done with it. Because
no, and look, there are so many systematic things when it comes to the immigration system. When we talk
yeah,
about, I've experienced when I used to go to the airport, like the lack of education, like, and as you said, it's no one's like not no one's fault, but like we can't fault people for not knowing something that has been systematically designed, right? To not know. So I can imagine you being a young man, uh, trying to figure this out, and you're like, I am telling you, I do not have like my parents don't have a social security number. But yeah, it can be frustrating. And instead of taking four years, it took you 9 years. So definitely. But I heard two things as you were talking, invitation and support. Those are two ways that in the midst of all the hardships, Joelle, like that definitely you had lots of, and incredible to hear how God yet, in the midst of it, and yet, right, he provided. The invitation, like every story is different. You did not have support like within like your family, so friends became that support for you, and the fact that they were able to invite you into their homes, like how kind. So for everyone listening, it's a way, like if you come across someone that has just immigrated here and they're in a situation similar to Joel's, like what a gift, like to be able to invite them,
Hospitality.
hey, come to my house. Do you have somewhere to go for Thanksgiving, or for Christmas, or whatever the case may be? And then your teachers, like what a beautiful testimony of, like, they took extra, when you said like extra time, like it took extra time and dedication to help you with your homework, and to help that, and also the encouragement of like, hey, you can do it. Like, I'm sure that was powerful, and it helped carry you through the hardships of like, of like, oh my gosh, doubting and insecurity, then when you're in a new country and new language is like, oh, it can feel overwhelming, but having someone to say, I believe in you, it's so powerful. So invitation and support are, the things that I heard you, say, and yeah, a great encouragement and reminder for all of us, as we encounter our brothers and sisters that come from different countries.
It is.
Yes. Also just the basic needs, like you were talking about that room of like your like the basic needs, like not overlooking those things. I know it's easy for a lot of people
It
to
was
think like,
amazing.
oh, well, I don't have time to give, I don't have whatever. But even like basic needs are still a thing that, you mentioned like you were grateful for,
Yes.
like to
Yeah.
be able to just have that at your
Mhm.
disposal.
Mm.
So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So great. So Joelle, we just want to thank you for sharing your story, for being here with us. We always feel honored and privileged to be able to step into that, and for you to be able to share just so openly, what your journey has looked like. And it's incredible to see, where you're at now, and where the Lord has brought you and will continue to know you, to do in and through you. So we want to thank you again for just joining us. Yeah, yeah.
Any
And
last words, Joel?
yeah,
No, thank you for having me. This has been great. It's good to be able to share my story. And there's more to the story, but I was able to give you some. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again. And for our listeners tuning in, make sure you check out our last episode, and we will see you on the next one.